As we've listened to my co-presenters today, I think you all agree that we're really going to gaze into the crystal ball of what the future holds for pre-hospital and retrieval medicine. For some, it sparks a feeling of excitement and enthusiasm, and for others, a sense of fear and anxiety. So how is it that amongst a group of such like-minded individuals, such polarizing feelings can be felt? It's simple. It's change. As I sat there in my backyard one evening thinking about change, I did it with a scotch in my hand. It's a funny thing about scotch. It's made from 3 simple ingredients: malted barley, yeast and water. You mix them together and the result could be bourbon, scotch or beer. So what is it that gives us scotch and not beer? It's the maturation phase, the barreling process that converts the clear, fiery liquid into the world's greatest drink. So when thinking about maturation and change, naturally my mind wandered to these guys. How is it that they're still doing it? They've been involved in pre-hospital and retrieval medicine since the 1970s. They've created a legacy amongst my group that's hard to quantify, having lived and worked through more institutional and fundamental social change than any group of paramedics before or that are likely to follow. But what is it about change and changing that causes such an emotional response? At its essence, I think it's because we care. I want you to think for a moment about the last time something didn't go right in your place of work. When all the dust settled, what were the lessons to be learnt? What were the changes that needed to be made? Did you take extreme ownership to ensure that the changes that were implemented actually worked to solve the issues identified? Did you care enough to change? Here's an example of a concept map that I use to review cases that I've been on. Things that have worked, things that didn't, changes I need to make, and a roadmap for how I'm going to get there. I do this because I care. I care about my patients, my colleagues, and my profession. And I do this to ensure that my lessons learnt become my reasons for change. You see, as you mature throughout your career, the changes you can make become smaller and smaller, having to fit in with an already well-established knowledge base. It's a lot like the scotch. It must sit and mature in oak barrels, slowly extracting the tannins and flavours of the oak for a minimum of 3, but preferably 12 years, before it can truly be called Scotch whisky. Many attempts have been made to speed up this process artificially, but all it produces is woody flavoured rubbish. I think Gareth Davies says it well, that the best performing teams deliver clinical excellence, not because they use unique techniques or have access to highly specialised equipment. It's because they deliver the most basic of care in a quality-assured manner with exquisite attention to detail. And it was attention to detail that was instilled in me by Michelle Beats, my nurse unit manager, as a new grad nurse in emergency at Royal North Shore Hospital. Michelle assigned me a 47-year-old male post-motorbike accident. I'd done his obs diligently, written his notes, and was across his ongoing care. And before escorting him to the ward, Michelle asked for a handover. I ran through the usual details. His pupils were equal, round, and reactive to light, size 3. And it was as these words came out of my mouth that the look on Michelle's face was one that no new grad would ever want to see. As she said, and I quote, "What, his left glass eye? Really? Reacting?" Michelle changed the way I do the basics forever, and I'm eternally grateful. Before we can change, I think we need to understand why. The Scots don't just make scotch because they can. They make it to be enjoyed, to be savoured. I joined the aeromedical unit not long after an incident killed a paramedic colleague. This tragic event was a catalyst for much individual and organisational change. System-wide change was spawned out of this sentinel moment. And it changed our culture as well. It resulted in a group that was already high-performing, team-based, and with a safety mindset, becoming relentless in its pursuit of not just a safe way of doing things, but the safest way. It grounds me in that moment before going out the door on the winch hook at 290 feet and sharpens my attention to almost laser-like focus. I focus on doing the basics right, in taking care in what I do, and in remembering that there are lessons to be learnt from every case. A lesson I learnt well one evening on tasking at around 9 p.m. into the sheltered waters of Sydney. We found the 21-year-old girl only just keeping her face out of the water after searching for her for over 50 minutes with the aid of night vision goggles. I winched down like I'd done many times before, but this time, instead of her coming up with me into the safety of the aircraft, she and the rescue strop stayed behind in the water. Something that couldn't happen, happened. I reviewed, replayed, and beat myself up over this case for some time, but it wasn't until thinking about and reading about black swans that I realised that you can't prepare for everything. Basically, you can't know what you don't know. You see, in early ornithology, only white swans existed. It wasn't until the discovery by a Dutch explorer, William de Vlaming, in Western Australia in 1696, that the black swan dispelled a fixed and firmly held belief, as they'd been there forever. We're often judged on our... Oh, incidentally, I did winch back into the water, pick up the young lady, and take her back to the safety of the aircraft, albeit holding onto her a little more tightly than she found comfortable, I'm sure. We're often measured on our last poor performance. And I think it's because of this that I've seen a lot of backslapping, high-fiving in my time as a nurse and as a paramedic. We celebrate our victories well, but spend little time focusing on improvements for the next game. If I'm honest, I don't want to seem like a naysayer, but if I'm honest, it's the times where clinicians were humble and even a little bit vulnerable that I saw the most growth and development. So, how can we as a collective leave here today with a more open and growth mindset about change? Well, I think if we do the basics well, we remember Michelle, and we're not afraid of black swans, it'll be a good start. As you mature throughout your career like a barrel of good scotch, what will be your legacy? What will be the changes that you started and saw through to execution? At the very least, the next time you're faced with a change, do it with a scotch in your hand and enjoy a good drink. Slunger. Thank you.
Good morning, Sam.
Hey, how you doing?
Craig Wiley from Smackforce News.
Hi, Craig. How you doing?
We've got a couple of questions for you.
Shoot.
Generally speaking, people don't like change. How do we ensure that we're not just implementing change for change's sake?
A big base or big organisation like ours, there is a lot of change that goes on. That's a good question. I think that if you engage all the relevant key stakeholders, which is a bit of a token phrase, but
So all of management, right?
Basically. And you ensure that they actually care about the issues, have some operators involved that actually do the task. I think you whittle away all of the fluff that's often around a change and get back to the core issue that was identified. Then I think that's a good way of avoiding change for change's sake. Thanks.
Okay. Then if there's one thing that you could change at your place of work, only one,
Who's
eh?
here?
Only one.
Oh, man.
Can we just see if there's any of Sam's managers? What would that be?
Sure. Look, it would probably be just that we are viewed a little bit as a independent unit, and we're part of a greater organisation, which is ambulance. And I think we do try to demystify and break down the smoke and mirrors that's often around the HEMS operation that we provide. We work hard at that, and it's done every time in every debrief I do after a job at the emergency department, at the back of an ambulance. And so I would love to see some of those false truths dispelled.
Thank you, Sam. Craig Wiley, signing off for Smack Force News.